In the closing years of the 11th century, Europe was a land filled with hardship, uncertainty, and endless struggle. Villages lived under the shadow of war, famine, and disease. Most people would never travel farther than the fields surrounding their homes. Life was simple, brutal, and painfully short. Men worked from sunrise until darkness only to survive another winter. Families prayed not for riches, but for bread, safety, and mercy. Yet beneath the suffering of that age, there burned something powerful inside the hearts of ordinary people. The desire to believe their lives meant something greater than survival alone. When the call for the First Crusade spread across Europe in 1095, it moved through towns and kingdoms like wildfire carried by the wind. Churches filled with crowds eager to hear stories about Jerusalem, sacred lands, and fellow believers suffering in the East. To many people, this was not simply politics or war. It felt like destiny itself knocking at their door. They believed they were being called to defend their faith, protect what they considered holy, and secure redemption for their souls. In an age where religion shaped every aspect of life, this mission carried enormous spiritual weight. Most of the men who joined the crusade were not trained warriors. They were farmers, blacksmiths, laborers, shepherds, and peasants who had never held a sword in battle. Many could not read or write. Some had never even seen a large city. Yet they sold their possessions, left behind their homes, kissed their families goodbye, and began marching into lands they could barely imagine. They did not know how long the journey would take. They did not know whether they would survive, but purpose gave them strength stronger than fear. The roads toward the Holy Land were filled with suffering from the very beginning. Hunger followed the marching armies like a shadow. Harsh winters froze travelers to death in the mountains. Disease spread quickly through aid camps. Some men collapsed from exhaustion before they even reached foreign territory. Others were attacked by enemies long before reaching Jerusalem. Yet despite starvation, wounds, and despair, thousands kept walking forward because they believed their sacrifice mattered. They believed pain endured for a higher purpose gave meaning to suffering. For many crusaders, the journey was deeply personal. Some hoped to escape poverty and violence that had consumed their lives for generations. Others sought forgiveness for sins they carried heavily in their hearts. The medieval world taught people that salvation could be earned through acts of devotion and sacrifice, and the crusade became a path many believed could cleanse their souls. The idea of dying while serving what they considered a holy cause filled them with both fear and hope. In their minds, this was more than a military campaign, it was a spiritual journey. The cry of Deus Vult, meaning God wills it, became more than words shouted in crowds. It became a source of emotional power that united people from different kingdoms, languages, and backgrounds. Nobles marched beside peasants, knights rode beside common laborers. For once, countless individuals believed they were part of something larger than themselves. The hardships of the road seemed smaller when connected to a mission they considered sacred. Shared belief created unity powerful enough to move entire populations across continents. As the Crusaders traveled farther east, many began to realize the true scale of the challenge before them. They encountered unfamiliar cultures, dangerous landscapes, and fierce resistance. Battles were violent and terrifying. Men witnessed horrors they could never erase from memory. Yet even in moments when defeat seemed certain, belief continued driving them forward. Human beings can survive incredible hardship when their minds become anchored to purpose. Without that sense of meaning, many would have turned back left, on their way to their destination. The siege of cities tested the Crusaders physically and emotionally. Long periods without food weakened entire armies. Heat scorched the land during summer campaigns, while disease killed thousands in overcrowded camps. Some soldiers lost faith and abandoned the mission entirely. Others continued marching despite witnessing friends and brothers die beside them. What kept many alive was not comfort, not certainty, and not even hope of victory alone. It was the belief that their lives were connected to a cause greater than personal survival. When Jerusalem was finally captured in 1099 after years of struggle, the emotional reaction among the Crusaders was overwhelming. Many wept openly as they entered the city they had dreamed about for so long. Some fell to their knees in prayer. Others embraced one another through tears and exhaustion. For surviving Crusaders, the journey had transformed them forever. They had crossed deserts, mountains, and battlefields because they believed purpose demanded sacrifice. Their victories and failures became part of a story that would echo through history for centuries. The real power behind the First Crusade was not simply military strength or political ambition. It was the force of conviction inside ordinary people who believed their lives could serve something greater than fear, suffering, or comfort. Purpose gave weak men courage. Faith gave exhausted travelers endurance. Belief turned peasants into armies willing to cross the known world in pursuit of meaning. Every generation faces moments where action demands sacrifice. The Crusaders were not perfect men, and history remembers both their accomplishments and their brutality. But one lesson remains undeniable. History has never been shaped by people who waited for perfect conditions. The world remembers those who moved forward while fear whispered in their ears and uncertainty stood directly in front of them. Every great civilization, every empire, every revolution began because someone decided action was more important than comfort. During the time of the First Crusade, Europe was filled with people trapped in hardship, violence, and hopelessness. Most men expected their lives to remain small and forgotten. Yet when the call to march toward the Holy Land spread across kingdoms, thousands made a decision that would change history forever. They chose movement over hesitation. For many crusaders, the journey ahead looked impossible from the very beginning. The distance alone terrified people. Most had never traveled beyond neighboring villages, yet they were preparing to cross mountains, rivers, deserts, and foreign lands controlled by enemies. There were no guarantees of food, shelter, or safety. Many knew they could die long before reaching Jerusalem. Still, they gathered supplies, left their homes behind, and joined massive groups marching eastward. Action became stronger than fear because purpose gave them the courage to move. Knights, peasants, laborers, and nobles all answered the same call, but none of them possessed certainty about the future. They did not have maps detailed enough to guide them safely. Communication between armies was poor. Weather conditions could destroy entire groups without warning, yet history remembers them because they acted despite uncertainty. Human beings often believe courage means the absence of fear, but courage has always meant something far more difficult. Courage means walking forward while fear remains present. The Crusaders understood this reality every single day of their march. As the armies traveled farther from Europe, challenges multiplied with brutal intensity. Hunger became a constant enemy. Entire groups ran out of food and survived on scraps or whatever they could steal, trade, or hunt. Harsh weather destroyed supplies and weakened soldiers. Disease spread rapidly through crowded camps filled with exhausted travelers. Men collapsed from starvation, fever, and exposure. Yet even as conditions became unbearable, thousands continued pushing forward because action had already transformed them. Once people commit themselves fully to a mission, turning back often feels more painful than continuing. The Crusaders faced deadly enemies not only on battlefields but along roads and mountain passes. Ambushes killed many travelers before formal battles even began. Some armies were nearly destroyed by poor planning and reckless leadership. Others suffered crushing defeats that shattered morale. Yet again and again, survivors regrouped and kept marching. That persistence became one of the defining forces behind the First Crusade. History often celebrates victories, but what truly shapes the course of events is endurance, the ability to continue after fear, pain, and loss have already tested the human spirit. There were moments when many crusaders could have abandoned the mission entirely. Some were far from home, starving, wounded, and emotionally broken. The easier choice would have been surrender. The safer choice would have been retreat. But history rarely changes because people choose safety. It changes because individuals decide their mission matters more than their suffering. Every mile marched under exhaustion became proof that action creates momentum. The longer they continued, the stronger their belief became that their struggle carried meaning. When armies finally approached powerful enemy cities, the scale of the challenge became terrifyingly real. Massive walls towered above exhausted crusaders who lacked supplies and proper siege equipment. Battles dragged on for months. Soldiers endured heat, thirst, and constant attack at the sky overhead. Yet action continued, driving them forward because stopping now would mean all previous sacrifice had been meaningless. Human beings can endure incredible pain once they believe their actions are tied to purpose. The greatest battles in human history are often imagined as clashes between armies beneath dark skies, with swords colliding and kingdoms burning in the distance. Most difficult wars are rarely fought on open fields. They are fought silently inside the human mind. Every crusade carried an invisible battlefield within himself. Fear battled against courage, doubt battled against belief, comfort battled against purpose. Before any man faced an enemy across the battlefield, he first had to confront the weakness, uncertainty, and hesitation growing inside his own heart. For many who joined the crusade, fear began long before the journey itself. The moment they decided to leave home, uncertainty took hold of them. They looked at their families knowing they might never return. They wondered whether they would die in some distant land far away from everyone they loved. At night, countless men lay awake questioning their choices while the weight of the unknown pressed heavily upon them. Yet despite these fears, they still rose each morning and continued preparing for the road ahead. That decision alone was a victory over the internal voice begging them to stay safe. The human mind naturally seeks comfort and security. Most people avoid pain whenever possible. The Crusaders were no different. Many came from poor villages where survival already consumed daily life, yet even familiar suffering can feel safer than stepping into uncertainty. Leaving home meant abandoning routine, stability, and everything familiar. Every mile traveled farther from Europe increased the emotional pressure inside the minds of those marching eastward. The body could grow tired, but often it was the mind that became the greatest source of weakness. The Crusaders crossed dangerous terrain, internal struggles intensified. Hunger weakened not only the body but also the spirit. Exhaustion caused doubt to spread through camps like disease. Men who once felt confident began questioning whether their mission truly mattered. Some lost faith entirely after witnessing death and suffering on the road. Others became consumed by fear after hearing stories about enemy armies waiting ahead. In moments like these, the battlefield inside the mind became more dangerous than any sword carried by an opponent. During long sieges and brutal marches, despair became a constant companion. Imagine standing beneath burning heat without food or water, surrounded by sickness and death, while enemy walls still stand untouched in the distance. Many Crusaders reached moments where surrender seemed easier than continuing. Some deserted during the campaign because their minds collapsed under the pressure. Others continued forward not because they felt fearless, but because they refused to let fear control their actions. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is the decision to move despite fear tightening its grip around the soul. The internal battle became even more intense after witnessing violence. Medieval warfare was brutal beyond imagination. Men watched friends die beside them in horrific ways. Blood-covered battlefields while screams echoed through the chaos of combat. Such experiences leave scars not only on the body but deep within the mind. Some Crusaders were haunted by guilt, grief, and emotional exhaustion. Yet they continued marching because once the human spirit commits itself to purpose, it can endure suffering that once seemed impossible to survive. Many Crusaders believed their hardships carried spiritual meaning, and that belief became a powerful weapon against despair. Faith helped them silence doubt during moments of overwhelming darkness. Prayer gave exhausted men the strength to rise after nights filled with fear and uncertainty. Believing their sacrifices mattered allowed them to continue even when logic suggested turning back. The mind becomes far stronger when suffering is connected to purpose. Without meaning, pain destroys people. With meaning, pain can transform them. The struggle between comfort and purpose remained constant throughout the crusade. Every difficult step forced men to choose between temporary relief and long-term conviction. Resting would have been easier. Returning home would have been safer. Abandoning the mission would have ended much of their suffering. Yet history remembers those who continued walking despite exhaustion because purpose often demands sacrifice greater than comfort is willing to accept. The strongest warriors are not always the physically strongest men. They are the ones who refuse to surrender mentally. Even leaders of the crusade fought internal battles within themselves. Commanders faced enormous pressure knowing thousands depended on their decisions. Fear of failure haunted many of them during key battles and sieges. Some struggled with pride, ambition, anger, and desperation while trying to maintain control over exhausted armies. Leadership itself became an emotional burden. The First Crusade revealed that every human being, regardless of rank or status, carries private struggles hidden beneath outward appearances. The story of the First Crusade is not simply about armies marching toward Jerusalem. It is also the story of countless individuals fighting silent wars within themselves every day. The road east forced ordinary men to confront fear, weakness, temptation, grief, and hopelessness. Some were defeated internally long before battle ever began. Others discovered strength they never knew existed because hardship forced them to face the deepest parts of their own minds. Every generation hears a call, though most people pretend not to hear it. It does not arrive with trumpets or armies standing at the gates. It comes quietly deep within the soul, reminding people they were meant for more than fear, routine, and endless hesitation. During the time of the First Crusade, thousands of ordinary individuals believed they were hearing such a call. Some heard it through sermons echoing across crowded churches. Others felt it during moments of desperation while struggling through poverty and violence. The call challenged them to leave behind comfort and step toward a purpose larger than themselves. For many Crusaders, answering that call required enormous sacrifice before the journey even began. Families were divided by the decision to leave home. Fathers kissed children goodbye without knowing whether they would ever see them again. Wives watched husbands disappear into distant roads stretching toward unknown lands. Some sold everything they owned just to afford supplies for the march eastward. They understood that purpose often demands surrendering comfort, security, and certainty. Remaining home would have been easier, but deep inside, many believed their lives would mean nothing if they ignored the mission placed before them. The road to Jerusalem became a test of commitment unlike anything most crusaders had ever imagined. Long marches exhausted entire groups before battle even began. Hunger followed them constantly. Illness spread through crowded camps where medicine barely existed. Harsh weather destroyed morale as rain, snow, and burning heat punished travelers day after day. Many realized quickly that dreams of glory could not survive without discipline and determination. The journey forced people to choose daily whether they would continue moving forward or surrender to suffering. Some crusaders discovered that the greatest obstacle was not the enemy waiting ahead, but the temptation to quit when hardship became unbearable. Human beings naturally seek comfort when pain grows intense. Every exhausted soldier faced moments where turning back seemed wiser than continuing, yet those who endured understood something powerful. Meaningful missions are never completed by people who abandon their path the moment difficulty appears. Sacrifice became the price of purpose, and every painful mile marched eastward strengthened the belief that their struggle carried meaning. Faith played a massive role in helping many crusaders answer their call despite overwhelming fear. In a world shaped deeply by religion, people believed they were participating in something sacred and eternal. Prayer gave men strength during moments of despair. Shared belief united strangers from different lands into one determined movement. Even when surrounded by death and uncertainty, many felt convinced their suffering served a higher purpose. That conviction gave ordinary people extraordinary endurance because the human spirit becomes difficult to break when anchored to belief. As battles grew more brutal, answering the call demanded even greater courage. Crusaders faced heavily defended cities, enemy ambushes, starvation, and psychological exhaustion. Men witnessed horrors capable of crushing the strongest minds. Friends died beside them during sieges and bloody assaults. Yet despite witnessing unimaginable suffering, many continued fighting because turning away now would mean their sacrifices had been meaningless. Commitment transformed into identity. They no longer saw themselves as simple peasants or travelers. They believed they had become part of a mission larger than their individual lives. The First Crusade revealed how purpose can transform ordinary individuals into forces capable of changing history. Most participants were not born heroes. They lacked wealth, power, and military experience. Many had spent their lives unnoticed by the world. Yet once they answered the call before them, they discovered strength hidden beneath fear and weakness. Hardship forced them to grow beyond the limits they once believed defined them. Purpose gave direction to people who previously felt lost inside the struggles of daily survival. Not everyone who answered the call survived the journey. Thousands died from battle, disease, starvation, and exhaustion long before reaching Jerusalem. Some perished anonymously along roads forgotten by history. Yet even in death, their actions became part of something larger than themselves. Human beings often fear sacrifice because they focus only on immediate pain. But throughout history, every meaningful achievement has demanded people willing to endure hardship for a cause they believe mattered. Comfort rarely creates greatness. Struggle often does. The emotional power of answering a call lies in the transformation it creates within the individual. A person who chooses purpose over fear becomes different forever. The Crusaders who survived returned home changed by what they had seen, suffered, and overcome. They carried memories of battles, hunger, and loss. But they also carried the knowledge that they had faced impossible challenges and continued forward anyway. Discover they can survive difficulty greater than they imagined. Fear loses some of its power over them. The story of the First Crusade continues to endure because it reflects a truth found in every era of human existence. Every person eventually faces moments where life demands a choice between comfort and conviction. Some ignore the call and remain trapped inside routines that slowly drain meaning from their lives. Others step forward despite uncertainty, knowing sacrifice may await them on the road ahead. Those who answer the call often discover that purpose is not found in safety or ease, but in the willingness to move towards something greater than themselves despite fear, pain, and doubt.